Hi, so this is my video on the 5 things that the players didn't ask for, the players don't want, but we're going to get in Legion anyway. Now, bit of a downer, don't worry, next week I will have positive ones. I'm going to alternate between being positive and a little bit critical. This one, it's like my critical weekend. Now, there are a number of features that are coming in Legion that are really good. They look like they've learnt a few lessons from Warlords of Draenor. But there are a few where it doesn't look like they have learnt anything. And these are my top 5. Okay, in number 5 position, one that will irk quite a few people, not necessarily everyone, which is why it's in number 5. That is a new Dalaran. Now, in Warlords of Draenor, they played a bit of an own goal in that they said to us we're going to have Shattrath and Bladespire as cities, and then that never transpired. Then they tried saying, oh no, we never said that at all, even though it's on like video. What we got was a mud rock, not even a very well developed mud rock, because even though it has changed, Ashran or the area outside it for our main cities has changed a little bit. It still looks very much like a temporary camp, which I suppose is what it is, fits the storyline, but it's not really what we want of a city. And then they complained about us staying in our garrisons all the time. What people really like in new expansions is new cities. Now, I personally would just prefer it if we had our main cities all the time. But a lot of people like the new cities. They like Shattrath. They like Dalaran in Wrath. Dalaran made sense in Wrath. We go to Northrend. That's the Scourge's backyard. We don't have anywhere. Okay, Magic City. Up out the ground, fly over there. Made perfect sense. Insofar as anything can make sense when you've got a city that can fly. But then it's brought back for Legion. I mean, it's not the first time we haven't got a new city. I mean, in Cataclysm as well, you could argue we really didn't have anything new. People didn't like that either. And then we've got the Broken Isles, and people latched onto Suramar City. People are very much hoping that, okay, Dalaran to begin with, our initial base of operations, but then once we've liberated Suramar City, can't we have that as our city? It's bound to look awesome. The art team will, as always, play an absolute blind. I am sure we can't see yet. It's not done yet. We can't get there. We can see as we fly over it, there's clearly a lot of artwork missing. But no one has any doubt that it will look fantastic. And then, again, it'll be an envy thing, won't it? People thinking, well, why can't we have that as our city? All right, they've tarted Dalaran up a little bit. We've got a nice statue of Ronin there. It's very nice. It's not Suramar City. It's what people want. Number 4. Number 4 is a real we haven't learnt a thing from Warlords of Draenor type situation. In Warlords of Draenor, there were a number of PR hiccups, shall we say. But there was one massive, massive PR disaster. Do you remember what it was? What do we think it was? Of course, it was flying. Now, I was actually on Blizzard's side with this one. But I, just like Blizzard, were in the minority. Important life lesson. Don't be in the minority. I know why they wanted to do this. Because I remember back to, in Vanilla we didn't have flying at all. If you wanted to get somewhere, you had to work out a way of getting there. Sometimes it was tricky. You would work it out. I remember in TBC, which was the first expansion to bring flying, but at level cap, you couldn't get it before. And I was finishing my levelling off in Shadowmoon Valley. And there were a number of quests that were quite difficult. Would have been really a piece of cake with flying mount, but were very, very difficult because there was lots of fast spawning mobs and there was tricky little areas to get around. You could do it though, and I did it, and I persisted because I had never had flying before, so I was used to having to battle my way through. After that though, no, because you got flying, and then you always had flying, at least at level cap. So from Wrath onwards, you could think to yourself, that's actually quite tricky. I could probably find a way there, but it's tricky. It will take a lot of time. Why don't I just leave it, and when I get my flying mount at level cap, come back if it's still of interest to me? And you can understand from Blizzard's point of view, they spend a lot of time crafting these worlds and they want you to explore it. They want to put little obstacles in your way to make it more difficult, but ultimately more rewarding. And that was very much their argument, and I was fully on board with it. The problem is, they should have stopped flying in TBC. They should have just had it as a TBC thing and never again. And it would have been fine. But now it's not. We've had it in every expansion. In Cataclysm, we had it while we were leveling. So it's now a feature of the game and people associate it with the game. And you can't now take it away. Some people never knew the time of vanilla before flying. They never knew it. They've always had flying, at least at level cap. So you cannot now take that away. But Blizzard, again, showing that even their PR people have no PR expertise at all. Initially, for all their strengths, this is a big weakness. They initially went through the lines of defending it. All right, fine. And I was on board with them on that one. Then they went, no flying. Get it through your thick heads. There's going to be no flying. Not now. Not for the rest of Warlords of Draenor. Not in the next expansion. Not ever again in World of Warcraft. 2 days later. So we're going to be having flying in Warlords of Draenor. But you're going to have to complete some achievements. Now, this sounded like a sensible compromise. People were still not, a lot of people were still not happy, but I think a lot more were placated, and it was a reasonable compromise. It means we have to explore the area first, so we have to appreciate the little things they put in to make it a bit more difficult to get at things. And that will unlock achievements, and there's various achievements to unlock, and once we unlock the achievements, then we get flying. That, to me, sounded like a good compromise that would satisfy most reasonable people. So in Legion, you'd think to yourself, okay, so they're going to do the same thing. They're going to have these achievements. They're going to make you explore everywhere first, and that will help unlock the achievements. And then when you've unlocked those achievements, you get flying, right? Not quite, no. The problem is, and they've said, that it's not actually going to be possible to get all those achievements when Legion launches. So this is a bit confusing. It's like, well, hang on a minute. What you're saying is I can explore everywhere, gather loads of treasures, do lots of events, access difficult to get to places, and I'm still not going to have flying? That's still not good enough for you? What the hell? That seems to be what it's about. It's still achievement driven. It's just that it will not be possible. They will not implement all the achievements you need until, I think, the first... I hope it's the first patch. I hope it's no later than that. But it is certainly not when the game launches. Again, it's a PR disaster for no reason. It's an obstruction to the will of the player base. And for what gain? I mean, I can understand you can't give everyone everything they want. Some people now argue that because too much quality of life has been given in this game, that is what makes people consume the content so quickly and get bored so quickly, and then complain there's no content. But really? You know, you're going to get people to explore everything and still say, no, you haven't explored enough. It's like, well, there is nothing else to explore. So, yes, I think they're asking for a PR backlash that doesn't help anyone. Well, that's number 4. We've got 3 more to come. And in number 3 is off-specs. Now, when details were emerging from BlizzCon about what would be included in Legion, in fact, before BlizzCon even, one thing really attracted me because I had been asking this for a long time. And that was that we can switch freely between all specs. Now, when dual spec came out, in Wrath, wasn't it? It was a good thing. It was a really good thing. I remember in TBC, the end of TBC in Sunwell Plateau, once we were sort of well advanced on bosses, I was a Retribution Paladin then as well. And I used to come in, first 2 bosses I'd be Retribution. Then I would be dispatched off to Stormwind to change my spec to protection for Fell Mist, so I'd be gathering up all the adds as a tank. Then I'd go back and respec back to Retribution for the next boss, Eridar Twins. Then I would go back, respec again for protection for Muru and Tropius. And then, you guessed it, I would go back to respec back to Ret for Kill Jaden. How much would it have saved, and how much hassle would it have saved if I could have had dual spec then? Of course, it means I wouldn't have got out of all the trash, but still. And, yeah. And then dual spec came. Hooray! And it made sense not to just let us switch between all our specs, because of the way talent trees worked then. You picked your talents. A lot of people that had dual spec had the same spec in both of those specs, and they're just slightly different arrangements of talents. But since MOP, and we don't do that, we can change. We only have a few talents, and we can change them very easily. We're getting used to now changing them between bosses. It serves no purpose restricting us, so we shouldn't have. We should be able to have access to all of our specs. And it looked like that's what they were doing. But again, no. They're frustrating the player base, and again, I don't know the reason. They're doing it in two ways. One, there's going to be a cost. Although you can change your spec without having to go to the trainer, there's going to be a cost associated with it. At the moment in Alpha, it's 100 golds. We're not being told that that's what it's going to be. That's just a placeholder because they haven't decided what the cost is yet. So it's like they've thought to themselves, we want to stuff them over, we just don't know how yet. They have a department, apparently, of people who are employed specifically to come up with frustrating mechanics. They're working very well. And then there's another way, and that's the artifact weapon. Now, when we start Legion, when it launches, we'll go on a quest to get our chosen artifact. We choose which one we want, and we go and get it. And we're limited to that to begin with. Now, this in itself is not a huge disaster. Get the artifact that is whatever your main spec is. Doesn't stop you changing to another spec while you're leveling. If you're a healer, for example, you can still get the healer, still get the healing artifact. You can level up as a healer. All healers have got damage spells. It's not as efficient as being DPS, let us be honest about this. But you could change to a DPS spec. You won't have an artifact to use. You just have to use a normal weapon, but that's all right. That's fine. You don't need your artifact. I don't want to overstate how powerful it is, especially in the early days. So you could just do that, and you could level as DPS for a bit, and then maybe change to healing spec when you do dungeons or any sort of group, and that would be fine. But then when you get to level cap, and you get to, presumably straight away, I don't know, I would hope straight away, get the other artifacts. The easy thing to do would be to say, okay, any artifact power that you get is put onto all your artifacts, any artifacts you currently hold, which means your primary artifact would have a head start because all the leveling artifact power you earn would just go on that, but then later on it would go on all of them. And I don't mean split up over all of them, I mean actually go on all of them. That would make it a lot better. Because people who play off specs have already got a little bit of a hassle, which is quite necessary. This isn't a deliberate thing just to frustrate them. You have to be able to gather up different gear sets. And Blizzard have actually helped with this. Like in this expansion, we had tier sets. And those tier sets change according to your spec. We have gear like plate gear that has strength and intellect on it. So you can switch between those things. And leather that has intellect and agility. And all this is good. And it looks like they were trying to help us with off-spec stuff. Of course, we need different rings and trinkets, and maybe still different gear, because different secondary stats are better for some than for others. And there's that hassle as well. And then gathering the weapons. And the weapons, even if they did what I'm suggesting with artifact power, it would still be awkward to maintain all the weapons, because the item level of the weapon is determined by the relics. And the relics, you do need to gather separately. So there would still be some hassle in getting all of your weapons up to speed. It just means you wouldn't be punished for the lack of traits on your artifact weapon, which will actually stop some people. There will be some people who might want to, like Rogue, for example, who's mostly an outlaw rogue, which is the new combat rogue. And they might say, well, assassination would be good for this fight, but my artifact weapon's a load of crap. And that, you know, so from their point of view, although in theory assassination might be better, in practice their geared outlaw rogue would be better on that fight. That's a bit harsh. So, and again, it's totally unnecessary. So my number 3 is off specs from this point of view. And it's because, as I say, they say there's going to be some catch-up mechanics to help you with the artifact power, but the problem is it still means farming extra artifact power. Extra artifact power that they would probably rather spend time getting on their alts. Number 2, we're getting into the big ones now. Number 2 is the one that for me is going to be the worst, but I'm trying to do this video from the point of view of everyone. And it's legendaries. Now, of course, I've talked about legendaries. Everyone's talked about legendaries in very negative terms, to the point where you wonder who this new legendary system is for. I'm going to split up the player base into 3 main camps. I know there's any number of ways you can subdivide the player base, but I'm going to do it into 3 main ones. In the first camp, the one I'm part of, was organised raiders. In the second one, players who play the game a lot. Maybe they do PvP, maybe they don't, but they don't do the organised regular raiding. They're not members of a raid guild. And then the ones who are, you know, actually casual players who don't play the game very much at all, maybe a few hours a week. They dip in and out. Okay? So who's this legendary for? Is it for the raiders? No. No. Because this is the group that needs the most, because there will come a time when you won't be able to get into a raid guild. And it's the same as now. If someone was to apply to our guild without the legendary ring, okay, the fact that we finished now, it'd be a better example we talked about during progress. If you didn't have the legendary and everyone else did, there'd be no point, because you ain't getting into a raid. Not a progress raid, because you ain't got your ring. So you need it now. The only difference is that it's not unreasonable to expect people to have it, because it's not completely random. The random element of gathering the legendary now is that 2 people who do the same amount of work on it, the variation in when you get it might be a couple of weeks. It's not a great deal, you know. But whereas this legendary system, again, normal distribution, there might be an average rate of getting it according to how much time you spend farming boars, but ultimately you've got some people on one end of that bell curve who will get 4 before they're even 110, and you'll get someone on the other end who is farming stuff for 10 hours a day because they've booked a load of time off work, or they just don't have work or whatever. 10 hours a day farming boars. Actually, I don't think it will be boars. I haven't found a boar yet. What have they got? Doesn't drop off squirrels. Panthers, say. 10 hours farming panthers or mountain lions. And they do that for 3 months and get nothing. That's going to happen. They're buggered. They're buggered. And you say to yourself, from the point of view of raiders, oh, but Blizzard have said that they're not going to, they're going to turn them off for raids for the first X number of weeks. Yes. The reason for that is so it doesn't disrupt the world first race. That, because you ask yourself, why X number of weeks? It's purely so it doesn't interfere with the world first race. I would say that they are probably thinking to themselves, once the first 20 guilds have done it, they'll turn them on. So for the vast majority of raiding guilds, you're going to need them on progress. If you don't have them, you're buggered. Right? You get 2 weeks of raiding, let's say. Maybe 3, where if you're unlucky, it's not going to hurt you. And then it will. And then it will absolutely hurt. And you will get people who are not very good, but have got a load of legendaries, getting into guilds and getting picked, even though they keep standing in fire. And people who are very good, they might be the best player of their class in the world. They might be the absolute authority on it. But unlucky, sorry, you're in a World 1000 guild. Okay, so it's not for raiders. So let's look at, but raiders are only about 10% of the whole player base. Stuffers. Next group, people who play a lot, but don't do the organised raiding. Does it help them? Well, you could think to yourself, well, yeah, I mean, they're not doing organised raids, so they've got lots of time. The raiders haven't got lots of time even to farm those boars if they've got work or something like that to fit it around, because they're doing their raiding and they're doing their dungeons. Not much time left to farm boars. The next group got lots of time to farm boars. Is it fun, though? No. But should be able to get legendaries at a faster rate, shouldn't they? Well, no, because Blizzard have also said that in actual fact it has a higher chance to drop off more difficult content. So if you're not doing that more difficult content, you've got the really, really tiny chance for it to drop. Not helping them either. And then you think to yourself, well, do I really need legendaries though if I'm not really doing the really hard mode stuff? Well, yes, you will. Because if you think it's bad getting into a pug now, where they insist you've got like world first achievement and 750 item level, what's it going to be like when they ask for a ridiculous achievement, a ridiculous item level, and must have at least 2 legendaries? Does it help that group of players? No, not at all. So then there's the last group. They only play for a few hours. Does it help them? How can it? These people who maybe they log on, maybe they do some PvP. Maybe that's what they want to do. Or maybe they do LFR and some mythic dungeons. That's all they've really got time to do. Have they got time to be farming boars? No, not at all. They're not even going to be able to aspire to getting these things realistically unless they get in a dungeon or something like that. So does it help them? So who does it help? No one. Now let's go back to how legendaries used to be to try and work out the evolution of this system. Legendaries used to drop off raid bosses. Very, very small chance to drop off raid bosses. People said, well, we don't kill those raid bosses. Or people said, well, we do kill those raid bosses, but it's only dropping for these classes and I play a different class. Well, this is not fair. Fair enough, Blizzard said. Quite right. So, what they did in MOP is they made it so everyone gets them. You start, it's like a quest. It's just a quest to get a legendary. It takes a long time to get the final version, but you can get it. Everyone will get it. If they do even LFR, you will get it. So what were the complaints about this? Some people complained the fact that they weren't legendary because everyone had them. Does that change in this new system? No, how can it? The whole reason it changed in the first place for MOP is because the opposite was been happening. People complained that they couldn't get them. It's entirely one way or the other. You either have a legendary system where everyone can get it, or you have one where only a small number can get it. This doesn't change that. It makes it a lot more random. It makes it so that some people will put lots of effort in and not get them. But enough people will get them that there is an expectation that you have to have them. An expectation that didn't happen before when they were very rare, because people will say, well, it didn't stop you getting into guilds if you didn't have a legendary before. Well, there's a couple of things I could say to that. One is they were so rare that it was not a reasonable expectation. That is all there was to it. But the other thing is, people who had these legendaries were tapped up by other guilds, more competitive guilds. So it did have an effect on getting into guilds. So again, it's not, there is going to be an expectation there, so it doesn't remove that. Who's it for? What is this all about? It is not about anything. I really don't see what group of players this helps. But that's just my number 2. The number 1, and that would be my number 1 if it was personal, but the number 1, I think, and this is going to hit everyone, and it already is doing, it has done the last few expansions, and that is the stated desire to bring out shorter expansions. Now, hang on a minute, Phil, I hear you saying. I thought this video was about things that people didn't want. Well, I think you'll probably find that a lot of people would quite like shorter expansions. At the moment, possibly, because the reason for that is because we've got a year doing nothing. But people never asked for this when the content could fill out the expansion. This is just a consequence of the fact that we've got a year with nothing to do in the game. But I think it's the stated desire to bring out quicker expansions that has caused this lack of content. Blizzard planned to bring out an expansion within a year, maybe a year and a half. They've said this. So they bring out a year's worth of content. The problem is it's actually impossible to bring out an expansion within a year and a half. Impossible. Because Blizzard do a few things very, very well. One of the things they do well is when they bring out their expansions and indeed games, they are very well polished and they are relatively bug-free compared to a lot of other games and expansions of games. They are pretty good from that point of view. The only reason for that is because of the extensive testing that goes on. Testing that is now going on now. Which means to get that testing done effectively, they actually need a lot of people to not have anything to do. I can spend a lot of time on Alpha now, even though there is not that much more for me to test on it. I've got the time to do that because I raid once a week for a few hours. Anything else I do is outside of World of Warcraft. If they were to fill out the time and the expansion, you'd get a couple of things that used to happen. One, people would complain they didn't have enough time to finish off all the content. Damned if you do and damned if you don't. Two, you would have people only testing the alpha a little bit because they're actually doing stuff in live and enjoying themselves in the game. So I think it's just impossible. If they want a good testing period, they have to plan for roughly just under 2 years, because that's the expansion. This Warlords of Draenor expansion is going to last as long as the older ones did. You know, Vanilla and TBC and Wrath that had 4 tiers of content, as well as non-raid content that came out during the expansion as well, including new dungeons. The only people that have ever asked for shorter expansions would be the shareholders, because, you know, Blizzard makes its money, and of course a certain amount of that profit goes to the shareholders, and it gets its monthly subscriptions. Right, fine. The big payday though is when a new expansion comes out, because people are then shelling out, as well as their monthly expansions, they're shelling out 50 quid or whatever it is in your local currency for the expansion. So it's the shareholders that have driven this. The players don't want it. They want content that fills up the expansion. The developers don't even want it. No good complaint to them. They don't want it. They want to be able to create a good game. And from their point of view, it must be a hassle, because every time they have to make a new expansion, they've got to think to themselves, oh crap, we've got to make whole new zones. We've got to change the gameplay mechanics, because that's just a thing about expansions. You can't just bring out new content. It seems to be that, I don't know whether that's a universal thing or just with Blizzard's attitude. They always think that they have to completely change classes and things like that as well. So there's a lot of things they'd have to change, and they must think, shit, another expansion, we've got to do this. What's going to be our thing for this expansion? They would much rather have a longer time between them and just produce more content for it. So anyway, those are my top 5 things that the players haven't asked for, the players don't want, but we're going to get anyway. See what you think. Do you disagree with any of my choices? Do you think that some of the things I've said actually some players do want, and with reasons why? Do you think I've missed something out that's even worse than all of those? Or do you just disagree with my choice of order? Put the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe in general. And if you don't like, don't forget to comment, please. And until next time, I'll see you later.